Dear students, dear colleagues, dear friends, and all present here today. First of all, it is a privilege to be here today with you, and that is why I sincerely thanks to the organizers for inviting me. As you have already heard, my name is Petar Bacic. I'm constitutional law professor from Faculty of Law, University of Split in Croatia. Besides constitutional law, at my home university, I also teach EU law. Now, in the same time, it is also a special privilege for me to be in a position to proudly say that I'm visiting professor in the Central European Academy as well, teaching and working with Ph.D. students. That is why I see many familiar faces here today. And also maybe I'm at least partly in a position to say welcome. Therefore, I am really pleased and honored to welcome you today to the Central European Academy and second annual scientific conference organized by the Ministry of the EU Affairs and the Ferenc Mádl Institute of Comparative Law in preparation for the Hungarian EU presidency in 2024. So, I was going through the conference program again last night. It is really an impressive number of participants, young legal scholars, many different panels, so many interesting and important topics. And also, you come from so many countries. Basically, you come from all over Europe. Surely, everyone here is looking forward to working with you during your time in Hungary. And of course, once when your studies are completed, to welcome you again into the Central European Academy, Ferenc Mádl Institute of Comparative Law, University of Miskolc family as a treasured alumni. While everyone here looks forward with anticipation to your accomplishments, one could also argue that you are already a very accomplished group. Why is that so? Well, you come here with outstanding academic credentials, of course, but also equally outstanding backgrounds and experiences. However, there is still a long road ahead of you. I found it to be a daunting and difficult task to write a keynote speech and welcome note to you, mainly as PhD students. On one side, not only that you come from a range of backgrounds and fields of law, but on the other side, the conference program itself is similarly comprehensive, it's rich, is multifaceted. So I would just here like to highlight just a few points that might help you to settle in. First of all, you are lucky enough to be here in Central European Academy, where there is a great deal of support for education of young lawyers. No matter your educational background, whether you have progressed from bachelor to master's or followed a more arabesque difficult route, doing a PhD presents entirely novel experiences, and it can also be difficult in unexpected and tricky ways. PhDs can be lonely, PhDs can be sometimes also frustrating, mysterious, can include existential crises, affairs of different kinds, but you are lucky enough to be in an institution where there is a great deal of support for many different sources that you can draw upon to help you with issues, to explore different concepts, and hopefully enjoy your time in Budapest, be it that you are here only for a few days or for a longer time. And first and more than anything else, the Central European Academy is a friendly and accommodating place, and if you go to the events such as this one, then you will meet people, you will form new friendships. The conference at the beginning of the academic year is always a great opportunity to meet everyone, from college students through to professors. The people around you, however you meet them, are important to doing your PhD. And conferences such as this one are always a good idea, even if you sometimes think that you know everything there is to know about doing a PhD. You will see that you can always learn something new. And that goes for all of us, of course. And finally, in many ways, you are on your road to recognition. Now, this reminded me, taken in very broad terms, of course, on H.L.A. Hart's rule of recognition. I'm sure that you already know that Professor Hart was one of the most influential legal philosophers of the 20th century. especially famous for his work, Concept of Law. That book was first published in 1961. It is sometimes even hailed as the most important legal philosophy work in the 20th century. Anyway, Professor Hart elaborates the rule of recognition. So, according to Hart, a rule of recognition represents foundations of legal system. He sees the concept basically similar to or as an evolution of Hans Kelsen's Grundnorm. So, all other legal rules in legal system are identifiable as members of a system only in virtue of the existence of such a rule of recognition. The relevance Hart attaches to the rule of recognition, as noted by my colleague Professor Burazin, as well as some of others, its characterizations in the concept of law indicate that the rule of recognition is first and foremost a rule in virtue of which other rules are legal rules. So, in other words, satisfying the rule of recognition is what constitutes norm as law. So, it would therefore be concluded that the rule of recognition has the character of a constitutive rule, or to reverse it, the recognition enables the rule to acquire constitutive role, that is to be collectively accepted by the relevant community. I leave now aside Hart's theory of law, as my intention was not at all to elaborate it further, and I wouldn't dare, but I rather wanted to use it as a metaphor, as this is almost a universal idea, important phrase if you want, in a sense that we all need to be recognized in order to accomplish ourselves and our goals, don't we? You are here to study, to gain knowledge, to acquire your PhDs, and in the end, to get a recognition from the community you want to be part of. We need to be recognized, and what is equally important, in that process, we need to build and preserve our identities, meaning not only our personal identity, but also the identity of communities that we belong to. You see, you come from all over Europe, and while you obviously represent yourselves, one should always have in mind that you are also partly seen by others as representatives of your countries. And countries seek recognition and try to preserve and build their identities too. I come from the Republic of Croatia, so I'll take it shortly, for example. Croatia is a state, of course, far from being the only one that had to confront different, serious challenges on its search for independence, national and constitutional identity. Its search for international recognition and constitutional identity started by the end of 1980s, beginning of 1990s. In fact, Croatia adopted its first constitution in 1990, in December, while it was still technically part of the Yugoslav Socialist Federation. Then, on basis of new constitution, held its independence referendum in May 1991, and then proclaimed sovereign and independent republic in June 1991. However, the question of Croatian national identity is older and more comprehensive than the complex of relations that were created by the adoption of constitution, declaration of independence, and realization of sovereign constitutional democracy or democratic state in 1991. So, different elements of Croatian national identity and its statehood can be traced through centuries and various compiled entities. To illustrate it, it suffices only to look at 20th century. Until 1918, Croatia was part of the Austria-Hungarian monarchy. After 1918, together with Slovenia and Serbia, it was part of the Kingdom of Serbia, Croats and Slovenes, that is Kingdom of Yugoslavia until 1941. From 1945 until 1991, Croatia as a federal unit was an integral part of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And then, after adoption of first constitution, after independence referendum, after proclamation of independence, on 15 January 1992, finally, 12 countries of the then European Community recognized Croatia as an independent state. You see, an integral part in this process of affirmation and strengthening of Croatia's identity constituted objective of fulfilling strategic goals of joining the Euro-Atlantic organizations, Council of Europe, NATO, the EU especially. And you see, these objectives were already proclaimed in the preamble of 1990 Constitution. So we could say that the idea of constitutional identity was closely connected with the goal of Croatia's full membership in these associations, especially in the EU, from the very beginning of its existence as a sovereign and independent state. But realization of these goals, European integration process as a whole, not only in Croatia, of course, that's why I'm speaking, because this goes more or less for all our countries, provoked need for explanation of a comparative problem of constitutional changes initiated by the enlargement process. So by 2013, when Croatia joined the European Union, all of these goals, international recognition, Council of Europe, United Nations, EU, were realized. But each of these steps was followed or preceded by constitutional changes. And the same question was asked in all countries that in the end joined the European Union. To which extent is national state, on constitutional plan, open to reflect readiness and response to two challenges of understanding and practice of modern state governance, namely the process of globalization and functional differentiation? This is because the theory and practice of contemporary state increasingly points out to the fact that these long-term trends bring the nation-state under such pressure that it sooner or later necessarily requires adaptation of traditional political and institutional arrangements. It is also about the consequences of the European integration process, which, as Joseph Weiler pointed out, more than any other process illuminates all the possible weaknesses of certain key concepts of constitutional and democratic thought outside the context of relatively homogeneous national states. That is also why constitutional changes sooner or later must emerge on the agenda of national politics. The phenomena of constitutional changes caused by complex political and legal processes of emergence, enlargement, maturity of the EU touches not only founders of classic old democracies, to call them like that, but also the ones in the so-called new democracies that are covered by the EU enlargement issue. These changes are seemingly necessary and integral part of the EU enlargement complex, of EU constitutionalization or harmonization of national policies. Those forces of various classic notions of constitutional law are provoked in this process. Among these concepts, the most important concern the very nature of state, foundations of constitution, center of state power, horizontal and vertical balancing of power, etc. So, the story of enlargement of the EU and negotiation process is in fact a story of imposing the obligation to accept the whole spectrum of principles, measures, laws, practices, obligations and goals that have been harmonized and accepted within the Union. That is why the process of enlargement and adaptations to these requirements in many cases led to changes in national constitutions even before thinking of inclusion in such a demanding structure which the EU undoubtedly represents. Going back to Croatia, at the moment when Croatia started with preparations for the EU membership, the Croatian negotiator with the EU stated that adaptation to Europe requires reform of the whole country. And still, although this whole process was prevailingly characterized by accommodation of Croatian political and legal system to the EU and the imperative of functioning in such complex multinational community, in the same time, it also provoked new engagement of Croatian institutions towards defining and strengthening of the national constitutional identity. So the elaboration of the idea of European integration, parallel process of adaptation of national constitutional political system to the complex of European law, prompted constitutional courts, also Constitutional Court of Republic of Croatia, to start developing the concept of constitutional identities. What I would like to say that exactly, in my opinion, taking active position in such transnational dialogue that must be established on the basis of mutual partnership and respect, including correct understanding of the established limits, but both to the national constitution as well as to the regulatory authority to the European Union, would enable our institutions to participate more actively in conceptualization and protection of national identity that is inherent to fundamental structures of our constitutional democracies. So to summarize, on our roads to recognition, in a quest for our identity, we must necessarily adopt different changes. In his famous novel Il Gattopardo, Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa writes his famous sentence: "Se vogliamo che tutto rimanga com'è, bisogna che tutto cambi." Or if we want that everything remains as it is, things have to change. But in doing so, in unavoidable adapting to new circumstances, we always have to have in mind who we are and where we come from. In conclusion, it is my sincere hope that you will treasure into the future the bonds which will develop between you on the conference, between you and the Central European Academy, Ferenc Mádl Institute of Comparative Law, through the process of learning. So the institutions aspire to serve as a solid foundation that support lives and careers of each of you, of each of us. And I would ask you to continue to support those institutions. So to those international students who are returning to their homeland soon, while wishing you future success in your respective fields, I would also like to encourage you to strengthen ties that exist between your countries, your institutions, and Central European Academy, Ferenc Mádl Institute of Comparative Law, University of Miskolc, and Hungary. I sincerely hope that what you gain through studying here will contribute to harmonious coexistence among the global community. And once again, let me offer my sincere congratulations to each and every one of you, and to wish you a successful participation at the conference. Thank you very much.